South Asia, and most citizens in this region do not have access to adequate nutrition, housing, universal education, or healthcare. Malgovernance plagues almost all these 8 countries of South Asia. The areas of governance that impact poverty and human development, to my mind, are lack of efficient and effective service delivery systems, rampant corruption, inaccessibility to justice, and lack of public sector support to the informal and unorganized sectors of the economy, where a majority of the poor pursue their livelihoods in South Asia. Public administration in South Asia so far has played a stellar role in nation building in the post-colonial period in all these states. But there have been recurring failures and underachievements given the complex challenges of state-specific cultures. But today, in the 21st century, all South Asian countries have democratically elected political regimes, except Afghanistan. Governments in this region are today more than ever confronted with balancing economic growth with human development, improving weak public service delivery systems, and additionally handling intra-state cleavages. Till date, South Asia accounts for 21% of the reported total number of cases of COVID-19 and 11% of COVID.
I think we lost her. Sorry, we can't help from this end, I suppose.
No, she has to rejoin us.
Yes.
Oh, this
Yes,
is
she is there. Okay, fine.
Unmute yourself.
Unmute, please.
Yeah.
Yes. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah.
Marked by, I was talking of the South Asian region, marked by limited or low access to quality healthcare, widespread poverty, and undernourishment. These low and middle income countries of South Asia with large populations did not, however, hesitate to lock down manufacturing units and other non-essential businesses and prohibit congregations during the lockdown period. They took these steps. To save lives, livelihoods had to be sacrificed. And COVID-19 has had a devastating effect on the economies of the South Asian countries, which we all know, which these countries were doing very well in the last 2 decades. It is speculated that they will shrink, and they have shrunk for the first time in 4 decades, affecting growth, poverty removal, and livelihoods, reversing the gains made by these countries towards achievement of UN-mandated Sustainable Development Goals since 2015. There is a demographic advantage of the younger population in South Asia, which has resulted in low overall mortality in the region due to COVID-19. The region must act on overwhelming evidence from the WHO that investment in public health is a prerequisite for spurring economic growth. The region now needs to scale up the existing social safety nets rapidly. So as to give some examples, the cash and food aid in Bangladesh, the National Rural Employment Guarantee Program in India, and the Benazir Income Support Program, Ehsan Emergency Cash Program in Pakistan. They were very effective in fighting the COVID-19 pandemic. So the South Asian countries have also resorted, besides these, they have resorted to online portals, social media, working from home, online learning, direct benefit transfers, and online delivery of health services, besides deploying facial scanners for identification of infected people. These were innovative measures. Investing in and strengthening the use of digital technology, information technology, and data systems led to many innovations in pandemic management in South Asia. In fact, one should ponder why the Sustainable Development Goals were mandated on all signatory countries, almost like an agenda of good governance, by the UN in 2015. Of the 193 members of the UN, barring 50 countries, the rest are all developing or underdeveloped, where, not surprisingly, only governments can deliver these mandates for their citizens. Needless to say, what comes in the way of their performance is not lack of public participation, but lack of adequate or enhanced state capacity to fulfill these goals by the next decade. After the COVID-19 disaster, the ongoing pandemic, old frailties and inadequacies in agriculture or industrial productive capacities or public health or transport systems have come out sharply in the open, reopening the debates over public policy reforms as never before in South Asia. South Asia, which comprises 8 countries and the largest number of the world's hungry, and 40% of the world's poor living in about $1.25 a day, 200 million living in slums, and 500 million people going without electricity, we need to ponder about South Asia. Except Sri Lanka and Maldives, the rest of the countries are medium or low in human development rankings. There's a sharp increase in environmental degradation, unemployment, terrorism, civil wars, drug trafficking, cross-border migration, and now the problems related to the COVID-19 pandemic, to my mind, pose a far serious and immediate challenge to the security of human beings than interstate disputes. South Asian economies have been widely reported in international fora for their outstanding economic performance in the past 2 decades. For example, in 2006, India led the region with a remarkable GDP growth of 9.4%, while countries like Pakistan and Bangladesh also achieved a growth of about 6% per annum. In the last quarter of 2014, South Asia was already the fastest growing region in the world, according to the World Bank Development Report 2014, through maintaining strong consumption and increasing investment. So robust economic growth in the past decade in South Asia had improved the living conditions of millions in the region and brought them closer to the first SDG target of removing extremes of hunger and poverty. India had reduced its number of poor from 407 to 269 million, a fall of 138 million in 7 years, between 2004-5 to 2011-12. This is faster than China's poverty reduction rate at a comparable stage of development. So across the region, today, we have some good indicators, but democracy today stands eroded by weak political institutions, corruption, income inequalities, and violation of human rights. So wide heterogeneities, feudal values, patriarchal cultural practices have hindered equal opportunities for women, tribal, and minority communities in South Asia. Democracy deficits are manifested by pervasive misappropriation of state funds, an absence of transparency and accountability in governance, and reluctance to decentralize or delegate political, administrative, or financial powers to lower units. Reform is possible only if people assert voices and start public campaigns for reform of governance. Democratic governance begins with commitment to and respect for the rights of citizens, irrespective of religious, racial, linguistic, class, caste, and gender diversities, in an accountable, inclusive, and participatory process of public policy making and implementation. The prerequisites of a successful democracy include a responsible press, a universal public education system, and a literate citizenry politically aware enough to take advantage of the press and voice their demands so that they reach the policy-making agenda. It is heartening to see, in fact, today, that civil society and NGO activism have reached a level in South Asia when they are able to transform public demands to policy inputs for law and governance. The current situation provides the need, I'm talking of the post-pandemic situation, to explore the opportunities that COVID-19 provides for ad hoc, short-term, and long-term policy changes in South Asian countries. There is a need to explore culture-specific standards of governance rather than adopting the Western mode of state building, poverty removal, economic development, and more recently, COVID-19 management. There is a need for bold governance research and reforms in order to generate South Asian inputs to governance literature, which would obviously focus on highlighting local public policies, developmental experiences, and indigenous best practices triggered mainly by local computations and resources. Research in governance should capture local policy, innovation, and implementation initiatives in order to achieve sustainable development. There is a need to focus on the changing realities of present South Asia at a time when Western think tanks are saying and are often heard proclaiming that the 21st century belongs to Asia. There is a need to rediscover South Asian inputs to governance, civil service reforms, information technology, models of financial inclusion, community development, environmental governance, and lessons from recent civil society movements in South Asia fighting administrative deficits. These are very important grassroots movements. South Asia has become today a melting pot of growth and inequality, of stagnation and reforms. There are common threads in the patterns of social changes visible, as there are state-specific transitions which are unique to a particular country. So today, despite COVID-19, there are rapid changes in society, economy, and politics, reflecting a dynamism in the region which, to my mind, has never been witnessed before. Therefore, this is the time to build new administrative capacities to cope with these changes, and there is also a need to retool existing capacities. Our current reality, though rife with threats like impact of climate change on the region, the possible impacts, they still present numerous opportunities to rebuild state capacity and thereby pave the way for rethinking and revitalizing public administrative capacities in the region. Public policy reinvention and prioritization only will lead to innovation. State capacity is typically an ensemble of ingredients: people's knowledge, infrastructure, resource processes, and authority. So therefore, retooling and reskilling of the bureaucracy to achieve important societal goals, for example, SDGs, will be necessary in South Asia, which has coped much better than the US or European countries in COVID-19 management, thereby proving that the historically ingrained narratives of development with the models of the West can now be reversed, which is a heartening sign. The more the challenges of implementation, the greater are the chances of innovation in South Asia. Mapping governance innovations in South Asia can be a beginning of research in administrative theory. Let me give you an example. A decade ago, former World Bank economist Land Pritchett was lauded for his thesis that while India was definitely not a failing state because it had achieved 7% miracle GDP growth, it was a flailing state. That is, while its performance was world-class by some measures of governance, it was short in other respects, notably in public service delivery, like health, education, and sanitation. So we were termed a flailing state. Today, after India has drawn worldwide praise for achieving 1 billion COVID vaccinations, is the flailing state thesis obsolete? We have no simple way to measure state capacity. Yet, nothing is more important for measuring development. Capacity includes skills, motivation, accountability, checking of corruption, and avenues to express citizen grievances to get redressal. The best reason for optimism is the clear-cut improvement in India on all these counts, which may just facilitate a return to its 7% miracle growth rate of the pre-COVID era. Inclusive growth or growth-mediated human development is the need of the hour in the South Asian region. However, the rhetoric of inclusive growth going hand in hand with elitist policies that often end up promoting a two-track society whereby superior world-class facilities are being created for the privileged, while the poor receive second-hand treatment or even become the target of active repression, has happened. For example, in India, state-assisted acquisition of land for private purposes with market compensation has created a lot of criticism. Social welfare programs like Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act in India or conditional cash transfers to the poor should, to my mind, act as a complement, not a substitute for public provisioning of health, education, or other basic services in India. Growth is impressive in all South Asian countries. We just lost the pace during COVID-19, that is all. But the pace of improvement has been rather slow in the living conditions of the people. The fact that economic growth does not automatically trickle down to better standards of living for all sections of the population is amply clear in the case of South Asia. In all South Asian countries, concurrent citizen and civil society demands for more open and accountable governance, the growing role of NGOs, judicial activism, and rights-based legislation to empower citizens are healthy common trends in South Asia. South Asian countries have to learn from each other's experiences. For example, India's green, blue, and white revolutions are
You have 5 minutes to go.
Of our heroic
5 minutes.
To achieve, food security. This shows that we can do it with a sufficient amount, with the kind of political. Excuse me, how much time did you say?
5 minutes.
I will require a little more time, sir.
Maybe 2 more minutes.
Well, I just need to.
Yes.
I need a little more time, perhaps. I was given 45
No
minutes.
No worries. Go ahead.
Yes, because I was given 45 minutes. So please give me some time.
Sure.
So therefore, the point I was trying to make was that, these mega government programs, how Bengaluru in India has become the world's second largest software market, or how Grameen Bank and now many other NGOs in Bangladesh are catering to the microcredit requirements of the poor is well worth documenting. How e-governance is playing a very, very helpful role in improving public service delivery systems in South Asia has been universally acknowledged and should be documented. So the point I'm trying to make is that in India, we do have public service guarantee acts. They have been a pioneering attempt at guaranteeing the right to public service to all its citizens. So therefore, let's look at the positives. India has the largest market for mobile telephones, and the current national administration has promised to make all government services available on mobile phones in the next few years, so that citizens do not have to even visit government offices. So this kind of move, these kind of moves, would be vital in pushing South Asians to better rankings in the UN e-government index and breaking into the top league in as far as e-governance is concerned. Now, Bangladesh has introduced reforms in government audit to bring transparency in the audit system. So therefore, and India has introduced the Mission Karma Yogi program to train public servants. So therefore, the leadership is a very vital input in transforming governance. So the leadership qualities that were shown in South Asia during COVID-19 management is something that we need to document. This has been definitely very heartening that very decisive steps by public governance systems in the entire South Asian region helped to contain COVID-19 to a very great extent. This is something the Western world has acknowledged. Similarly, if we look at the training patterns of civil servants in South Asia, this is also something that needs an overhaul. Simply because in the South Asian systems, the person is fit into the post. It's not the other way around. So if you do want that citizen-centric administration, your training programs also need to change, because training would mean more use of not only technology, but e-governance, of course, will greatly help in being focused on citizens. But there are also other measures of training reform. I can't go into detail because of lack of time. But I think the Mission Karma Yogi program started by the government of India does take care of the state-of-the-art training programs which the Western world offers to its civil servants that can well be emulated in entire South Asian region to call for more citizen-centric, citizen-focused, technology-enabled administration where the grievance redressal is taken care of in a very big way, and the role of the civil servant is to fit into the job and not vice versa. So teaching of public administration, we have to now understand that teaching of public administration has to follow the practice. Earlier administrative theory and the practices of administration were completely not related. Theory was talking of something, and the practices on the ground were giving us a reality check that, theory does not match practice. So today, the most important thing is to understand the vulnerabilities, the shortcomings of practices. And if they are improving at a great pace, as we see in the South Asian region, through training, through other kinds of, realities, e-governance, for example, the training of civil servants have definitely improved. And we find governance, public governance, the quality definitely improving. Then that has to get into the teaching and the academics of public administration and public policy. So public administration, the teaching of it cannot be theory-based alone. It should look at what you understand by administrative responsiveness, what do you understand by administrative accountability. What do you understand by transparency and governance? You know, the practices, the programs of the government, which are leading these concepts, should now be incorporated in the teaching of public administration so that students get to know that what kind of practices can reform public administration on the ground, and public policy centeredness is something that public administration teaching must incorporate. That's extremely important, that today there cannot be teaching of public administration without focusing on concrete public policies, why they have been successful, why they have been moderately successful, why they have been failures, if any. So the right questions have to be asked about public governance today, and that relates us to actual public policies and their performance. Unless you do public governance on the ground, incorporate the reasons, public policy cycle is something that the politico-administrative relationship will have to be studied, that how political will with bureaucratic capacity, unless they are matched, that is the right political wit with the right bureaucratic capacity through training or whatever is matched, you cannot have policy implementation a success. So the entire policy cycle in which both the politician, the political regime, the politicians and the administrators play an important role. And of course, the implementation and execution is entirely dependent on bureaucratic capacity and will. And then review the whole process to see what went right and what went wrong, what works on the ground, what does not work on the ground. And all of this must go into the teaching of public policy and public administration to students in the South Asian region, so that we are aware of the current realities in the South Asian region, because South Asian region has done some remarkable governance innovations, has done some governance research, and the local practices, I mentioned some of the local practices in the South Asian region are worthy of emulation even in the advanced Western countries. And the COVID-19 management practices, some of them are worth emulating in advanced countries. So therefore, let us not demean or devalue our own innovations, our own practices, our own, the kind of traditions that we have had, which have led to successes. And we need to share best practices in the region, which is equally important. Not just keep it to ourselves, but let us share all our best practices, the administrative practices, the governance practices amongst and between each others, so that we develop a core South Asian governance research, reforms, and literature, which will help enrich the core public administration theory and literature. And it goes into all of that, hand in hand, teaching with training, with research, so that a corpus of South Asian public governance reform literature enriches theory and practices of public governance globally. So these are my few of my ideas which I wanted to present. And I do believe that there is a lot of scope for optimism today, because the entire focus of SDG goal implementation is now on South Asia. So if we do things correctly, our SDG goal implementation should be near perfect by 2030. And that is the minimum agenda of good governance for all South Asian countries. Once we succeed on SDG implementation in toto by 2030, then we've made the biggest point possible to make, that South Asia can lead in the world in public governance through its innovations, practices, and all the challenges are here. All the challenges of good governance are in the South Asian region because of the problems that we have. But if we could do COVID-19 management the way we did, there's hope, there's optimism. So if public administration today finds that there is a reductionist trend in the Western world, a reductionist trend in the role of the state in the Western world, in developed countries. We do notice a reductionist role in the in public administration's models that we find in theory. Talking of a reductionist role, there is every possibility of an increasing role for public administration theory, study, training, and research in developing countries led by South Asia. So I am very, very optimistic that unless and until we innovate with practices, we won't innovate with theory. And we are doing it in our practices. There's a lot of innovation in local practices and governance, and that will reflect in innovations in theory. And we will move towards a much more connected theory, a connected world of public administration, theory, practice, and research in the South, beginning with from perhaps the South Asian region. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rumki Basu. It's fascinating. I did try myself to make a note of your core points, which I will summarize later on when our distinguished colleagues will give the comments and views. We have few designated discussion, and if time permits, I'll also open the floor to other colleagues to come up with. So, according to the list I have, I would give the floor, as the list I'm having in my hand is Mr. Basantraj Siddiqui. He's the Senior Director of Studies, Nepal Staff College. And we have about 5 to 7 minutes time for you. Is that enough?
Fine.
Thank you.
Respected Professor. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
So, respected Professor Salahuddin, Principal Speaker, respected Rumki Basu, distinguished panelists, and all the distinguished participants of this very meaningful theme of today's conference, that is regarding capacity building, training, and teaching in public administration. So I feel privileged to be here, first of all. And on behalf of the Executive Director and myself also, I would like to congratulate all the organizing institutions of her making this conference so successful. So it is really very meaningful for all of us being together and continue discourse regarding strengthening our public administration system and making it more contributing in this post-pandemic world. So as Professor has Alam allocated me time, I would like to, I will try my best to complete my observation and the sharing in this time. And I will briefly share how we are also doing our capacity building efforts in the area of public policy and to strengthen public administration. Nepal Administrative Staff College is leading capacity building institutions of Nepal government and public enterprises, basically. And we conduct different training programs, both core competency-based and specific competency-based programs, research activities and consulting efforts to support government, including policy suggestions to government. And in these years, we have tried our best to make the program more competency-based so that the target participants ranging from induction level officials to senior executive development, senior executives who are aspiring secretaries of the government of Nepal, they participate in these training programs. So as Professor Basu reiterated that how the context is enforcing us toward taking innovative efforts and engaging our own contributions, our own innovations together, then it would add value in our capacity building efforts. So I want to relate her deliberations in 3 C's. The first C that she highlighted is the context and appreciating the context, post-pandemic context, as she highlighted and detailed about its both dynamics and dimensions. So one C is that we have to meaningfully appreciate. The second thing is the second C here is competence. Now in this post-pandemic world, whatever the context that we experienced in these 2 years of time, then the building competence at all levels is the key. That is my reading. And the third C that I would like to share here is the conscience. Again, then we need to inculcate the values, inculcate the orientation among civil servants. So that is related with conscience, which is related to maybe responsiveness, accountability, integrity, and all those things. So in this alignment, our reflection is also same. And we have observed that in induction level, we try our best to inculcate values in the new recruits by some kind of inductive efforts. Like that we call value commitment or value proposition exercise. Coming at the NASC, they will just get engaged in these groups, in their groups, and they internalize themselves through an exercise that they propose their value and they commit to their values. And we just try to internalize, contest themselves in the process. So that is one our practice that I think it is valuable to share in this forum. And another strategic point in our capacity building effort is a senior executive development program, which runs over 6 months and is aligned with 5 different modules: leadership, integrity, strategic management, governance, and public policy management, in which public policy management is spread over 6 months in different blocks we have designed in this way, and to make them executives how to design the evidence-informed policies that will solve the policy problems that we are facing at this moment. So in this process, it is very inductive process. In group, they themselves take certain potential policy agendas. They explore the different dynamics, its evidences, and all those things of the policies agenda. They fix the policies agendas or the frame policy problems, and they design tools, communication tools, and monitoring and evaluation frameworks, etc. in over 6 months period. And these policy proposals, we conduct at least 25 executives per year, and 5 policy proposals they develop, that is presented to the government of Nepal, and it is further taken into the decision process, so that would be very valuable policy proposal to the government of Nepal. So in this way, we are doing our practice. And I just want to conclude with a few takeaways, I think, for all of us, that what is our reflection is the classical notion of leadership has now to change in our all programs that we deliver to the senior executives, mid-level executives, or the entry-level officers. Because as we know and as we internalize the thing that leadership is not a privilege of the top. It is neither a position, but it's responsibility, and it is distributed at all level, and it should be distributed at all level. So this notion needs to be inculcated at all levels of bureaucracy. One that is very important thing, since it is very we have observed many a times that leadership is related that it is only that the top has to do something, but it's all about initiative at all levels. So that notion we need to inculcate in our capacity building programs, because what we see and what we have observed in these 2 years is our proactiveness, our initiatives at all levels, especially the local government. For example, in post-pandemic world, we have seen that the local government did their best to deliver the service or to deliver the healthcare services in this area. So that says us that the leadership should be developed at all levels, and it should be seen like it is distributed role at all levels. And another thing is that the frequency of capacity building efforts, frequency of the programs that we deliver to them, it should be expanded. So the learning opportunities need to be expanded. As in the post-pandemic world, we used virtual platforms very efficiently, then it should be continued in the blended approach as well, and the accessibility of learning should be promoted. That is our reflection. And finally, I would like to share that, of course, we are still together, and we are joining our hands together to develop capacity of officials. In the institution in South Asia, we are trying to conduct such conferences. Nepal Administrative Staff College has also taken initiative in conducting a conference in policy and public policy and governance. Unfortunately, last year we could not make it happen, but in 2022, we have planned this conference. Similarly, we have shared our knowledge, understanding to different forums in this pandemic world. So the community of practice we see, community of practice, as Professor Rumki rightly pointed out, that we have to share our learning, our innovative efforts, our initiatives together, so we can grow together. And one very important and noble initiative we have taken is, as our country has transformed into federal system of governance, NACS has taken initiatives to develop a capacity of federalism and its different dimensions, how to federalism deliver in our country, and learning from the countries which have already practiced federalism. We have created a knowledge repository, and we have dedicated center as Center of Federalism Studies that looks after all the federalism affairs, research and capacity building affairs. So in these initiatives, in the days to come also, we'll be together, and the Nepal Administrative Staff College is always committed to share our learning, to learn from all the valued institutions that we are together. So again, once again, I would like to thank you so much for this valuable time. Probably I took more time.
No, you didn't.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So thank you, Professor. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Basant Raj Siddiqui, for a very precise and to the point. And of course, you had a very illustrious start with Professor Rumki Basu, who will take care of later on. And I would also expect our discussion, if you could kindly also touch upon some of the points she has mentioned, that will further give us a little more deep insight and understanding your comments on that. So again, based on the list, I have the next distinguished special panelist is Dr. Farhad Hussain. He is the reader in the Development Management and Policy at the School of Environment, Education and Development, Manchester University. Dr. Farhad Hussain, the floor is yours, and 10 minutes is allocated to you. Floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thanks for inviting me to this very special and important event. It's always a pleasure to see scholarly faces of the people that I know. It was a pleasure to listen to Professor Basu. I am sitting with her in NASPAA's SICA, that is Sectional International and Comparative Public Administration panels. We know each other quite well. It was a very enlightening speech, and your call for a greater cooperation between South Asian nations are really very important in these uncertain times. COVID-19 always reminded me about the black swan theory that Nassim Nicholas Taleb talked about in 2007. It's this black swan theory, if you know that theory. That is events which are very unpredictable and have potentially serious consequences. This is what happened with COVID-19. Of course, it's not, pandemics are not unpredictable, it happens. But the scale that we have experienced over the last 20, 21 months is really quite devastating. So these, the black swan theory talks about the impact of the highly improbable events that we are not prepared. For example, you can name of 9/11 in the US. You can think of the recent past in Lebanon. There is this, in the port, there is a huge accident, and you have seen the impact of that accident on the economy in Lebanon. So those are, this black swan theories talks about those areas. When we talk about those black swan events, we can have various discourses whether COVID-19 is an event of that scale or not, but to me, it has all these potentials to fit into those theories that suggests. In terms of the COVID responses by various nations, we cannot be very conclusive because the biggest sufferer were the Western nations. For example, I live in UK. We cannot imagine what we have gone through. We know people, those who died, who suffered. We have relatives who suffered with COVID-19. Our state was quite incapable to deal with the crisis. You all know about NHS, National Health Services, is quite a globally very effective organization. The whole system failed, if not collapsed. So there wasn't the uncertain times, but to me, I always argue that nations never fails. There are theories about state failure, market failure, but market may fail, but how we interpret that. But in terms of nation failure, nations never fail. If nation would have failed, Afghanistan would have been failed quite many times, many years ago. I'm sure in Nepal, you have seen quite much with various insurgencies, various phases. It has not failed. But then what Professor Basu said in various indicators that she tried to bring to discuss and have a discourse on this crisis in terms of state capacity building, role of NGOs and all others. What we have seen so far, COVID responses are mostly tackled by the state with participation from the private sector, not much from the NGO sector yet. Civil society didn't get engaged that much. And I know that in Bangladesh, they tried, but there was little scope for them to come up with. If you think of Ganashastra Kendra, they tried to tackle certain situations, but they are not very welcome. So there has been those new public management phenomena with those big pharmaceutical companies. They are collaborating with the states. Not much space given to third sector or other civil society organizations. But probably, this will be a time that we need to integrate third sector as well. To conclude, I know that I have just 10 minutes, so I wanted to talk more about public administration as a discipline. Sometimes, we sit in different forums in public administration, and then we listen to economists, sociologists, political scientists. So sometimes our discipline is really getting a bit lost. We really need to regain, the lost, what we have lost in the past. In terms of its theoretical orientation, we need to catch up with recent events, for example. Otherwise, it will be a big problem within a disciplinary perspective. In UK, we don't have much talk about public administration. Rather, we talk about public management. So all these public management theories are discussed in here. Then public administration always shares is kind of theoretical orientation with politics, public policy, many other, this sociology. But then with this event, I think what we need to do, what we need to learn from a disciplinary perspective, that we need to integrate more courses on crisis management, for example, with our traditional MPA programs, Master of Public Administration program, and also our civil service training programs. And we can draw our lessons that we have learned from our recent past. For example, COVID-19 is not the only challenges the nations are going through at the moment. If you talk about Bangladesh, the Rohingya crisis was a kind of huge crisis. It didn't attract as much as global attention as it should. How the government responded, what kind of impact the Rohingya crisis has made on public service delivery at a local and central level, moving people from one part, those who are migrated from another country, and moving them from one part to another part of the country. These are always very sensitive issues, not only sensitive in a state security, but it's also sensitive in terms of kind of human, moving human, and these are human. They are not animals. So those kind of humanitarian efforts are more needed to tackle those crises. Within South Asian context, Afghanistan is a burning issue at the moment. No countries are taking any responsibilities. So I would say that there should be more courses on crisis management as part of public administration curriculum in universities. At the same time, our public service training provisions around South Asia should incorporate more about those issues, because it looks like when events happen, then we try to respond rather than we plan in advance. So that would be my take on from this speech what Professor Basu has given. We should be really thinking a bit more of integrating crisis management courses into our public service training provision and also in our master's program. I mean, Bangladesh have had a lot of problems in this, and I mean, there was a garments fire, building collapse, earthquake may strike anytime in any South Asian nations. Pakistan had a huge problem with earthquake. Nepal had the same problem. Is Bangladesh prepared for it? So this kind of crisis preparedness is very, very important to tackle. And from an academic point of view, I think we really need to take what Professor Basu said, but in a concrete way, we should really introduce some curriculum immediately without any delay, really, because when it happens and it needs to be tackled. So with that note, end up here. Thank you, Professor Basu, for your enlightening speech and the panel to invite me to share these concerns. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Farhad Hussain. We have very specific points there. We may perhaps at the end of the session, I'll dare to try to make a summary of those. So our next distinguished panelist is Dr. Noor Siddiqui from Flinders University. Dr. Siddiqui, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir. It's a real pleasure to see so many faces, including my honorable teacher, Professor Kamrul Alam, Professor Wahiduzzaman, and my junior brother and friend, Dr. Farhad, and of course, many new faces. I must thank the North-South University of Bangladesh for giving us this platform, which has brought so many people together. It's wonderful, especially during this COVID time when our movements are so restricted, yet we are able to share our thoughts. Thank you again. Let me begin by commending Professor Basu for a very, I would say, insightful presentation. She has given a very comprehensive portrait of the current situation, especially in South Asia. And of course, she has outlined the challenges and implications for public administration, theory and practice. And she has also outlined some of the progresses, or I would say shining examples from South Asia. Yet the region, as she has rightly pointed out, faces a lot of complex challenges, not just poverty, inequality, but on many different fronts. And I cannot agree more with Professor Basu when she talks about deficits in administration, problems of governance, corruption, and of course, at the same time, the importance of capacity building, state capacity or administrative capacity, whatever way you put it. So she is, I would say, spot on in terms of our kind of observation about the situation and what needs to be done and how we should move forward. And I thank Professor Basu for enlightening us with a very important kind of presentation session. I also believe this should serve as a useful fodder for research, training, as well as practice. All of us who are involved in public administration, education, training, we should find lots of interesting ideas to move forward in the coming days. Let me just highlight two just quick points because of time constraint in the way of reinforcing what Professor Basu has raised. And of course, other distinguished panelists, they have also touched on. And then if we have time, perhaps we can talk about those other issues at the end during the question and answer sessions. The first point I would like to make is that this would be an understatement to say that the COVID has changed our life. Of course, COVID has changed everything, but COVID has changed in a far more profound way than anything else in the recent history of mankind. This has virtually changed everything: the way we live, the way we work, the way we teach and learn, the way we do business, the way we govern societies. And of course, in terms of our daily life, everything has been changed. And although this pandemic is far from over, what is very clear that post-COVID world is going to be completely different from what it used to be. And that has major implications for governance, implications for policy, practice, training, education, everything. As the cost of COVID is being counted, what is clear at the moment is that COVID has accentuated, aggravated some of the existing problems. At the same time, COVID has also added a lot of new problems, some of which Professor Basu has highlighted briefly. And of course, we talk about poverty, inequality, and current data shows that there is a growing incidence of poverty. Millions of people are likely to become poor at the end of this COVID situation. There are issues of joblessness, issues of growing inequality in the society. I think this morning I was looking at the newspaper in Bangladesh. There was a headline that 10 lakh, which is roughly 1 million children, are likely to die this winter in Afghanistan. It may not be because of COVID, but of course, COVID has a lot to do. And that's just one kind of example in the post-COVID world that we are facing. And if COVID has taught us anything, that is that public sector has to pick up the pieces. Whoever might be responsible for this problem or wherever it has originated, and when the people suffer, it is the responsibility of the public sector, the government, throughout the world, to fix the problem and to bring the economy back on track and make people's life and livelihood normal and so on and so forth. So what we can see, or what we can safely conclude, is that in the post-COVID world, public sector or the government has to take a bigger responsibility in the society. Very much in the same way, we have seen that after the Great Depression or after the end of the Second World War, the state has taken a huge responsibility in terms of rebuilding the economies throughout the world. And I can see perhaps that kind of revivalism is on the way, which essentially means that there is a great urgency in terms of building or improving state capacity. In the past, we have ignored this in the name of outsourcing, privatization, marketization, and so on and so forth. And now we realize that we don't have the capacity to handle the type of challenge that we are faced with. And so the post-COVID world, I can see a bigger role as far as the public administration is concerned. And that requires lots of rethink in terms of what we do, in terms of what we teach, in terms of how we train our public servants and the graduates to prepare themselves for the new roles in the post-COVID world. The second point that I would like to make is that in the post-COVID world, we have to, those of us who are involved in public administration, whether education, training, or practice, we must reassess our position. We have to reposition ourselves for the new world. We cannot and we must not continue with the old baggage in terms of training and education that we have been running for decades. We have to, as I said, prepare our graduates for the new roles. And as I said, in many cases, we have to rethink about our curriculum. Professor Basu and our other panelists, they have also highlighted this aspect, pointing to the areas where focus needs to be made. And in the institution where I'm teaching, I'm involved at the moment, we have actually started this process already. In light with the emerging realities, we have decided to revamp our curriculum and of course, how we deliver the curriculum. Recently, we have decided to discontinue some of the existing topics, or we call courses, topics in Flinders. And we have decided to introduce a number of new courses instead, like the topics like emerging digital future. We have decided to introduce a topic called sustainable development and global inequality. Public leadership, I think time and again, leadership has been highlighted. And we need a new breed of leaders in a new world. Okay, so we have decided to introduce a new topic called public leadership, innovation, and kind of adaptation. We have decided to introduce topics called evidence-based policy and project management. environmental policy, governance, and so on and so forth. And I'm sure we are not the first and we won't be the last. Many institutions, they have to rethink about their educational curriculum. And of course, in terms of delivery during this COVID situation, not a single day we actually stopped offering our courses. We were able to move to online, switch to online very quickly. And then we introduced hybrid teachings. Many of our students were stuck overseas. But again, there was no problem because technology is an enabler. We have been able even to include them in our teaching and learning process. And as I said, we are not the only ones. There are many institutions throughout the world. They have been rethinking and redoing their kind of curriculum, training, education, and so on and so forth. So as I said, there are a lot of changes which are underway, and we have no choice but to rethink and redesign and reformulate. Professor Basu was talking about the importance of incorporating or learning lessons from different parts of the world. Of course, this is no new phenomenon, but I think in the post-COVID world, that will figure even more prominently, that how some countries were able to handle this COVID crisis more effectively, more efficiently than other countries. What can be learned? How can we prepare ourselves for another round of kind of, if not COVID, another pandemic, another kind of crisis? And we are living in a world which is very uncertain, unpredictable, and we have no choice but to prepare ourselves for our current as well as future graduates, public servants, policymakers, for that kind of new realities, new situation that we are facing.
Thank you.
So with that, I think I would end here. I'll be happy to take any questions if there are any. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Siddiqui. Certainly, we will have another round of discussion with our other participants. Now I would invite Dr. Zaul Haq, the Joint Secretary, Ministry of Public Administration, Bangladesh. Dr. Zia, floor is yours, and as assigned, as instructed by the organizers, you have 10 minutes for you.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to listen to Professor Rumki Basu. As a person who is working in public administration, as well as trying to learn public administration, it was of immense benefit because many of the issues were very cross-cutting and as well as insightful, I would say. Maybe I would start with three. I would just concentrate on three issues. One is the COVID-19, that is the main focus of our discussion, and the kind of changes that we have had in public administration. Yes, as I look after training, I can say that it was a huge challenge because suddenly we had to almost rearrange our entire training programs. And as you, those of you who are working in Bangladesh and maybe some for friends around, they know that all the major training institutions are working with the Ministry of Public Administration, Bangladesh Public Administration Training Center, and the Civil Service Academy for Administration, and a couple of other big training centers where on a good day, thousands of public servants actually take training. So we had some improvement. Yes, we had previously we were not very much encouraging online dissemination of training and education, but due to the COVID-19 reality, we actually have had a policy, online training policy, which covers the training and also higher education. So this is an improvement, I would say, and we have found that it has also opened up new avenues. Previously, the speakers whom we could not actually get physically, and we could get them online. So in some areas, the quality of training actually has increased. So this is something that we have found from our practice in training. But about COVID-19, I would say that there are, I think, two major challenges. As many of you have shared that since the Great Depression, this is the most severe crisis that we are facing. So we can assume, and as the data shows, that we are maybe lagging behind in some of the critical areas of public administration or service. For example, education, health, employment. These are the sectors that have actually suffered. So there are immediately we have a task of rebuilding. Of course, we want to bridge the gap and also have to address the new challenges that COVID-19 has actually presented with. So the training in civil service should be arranged in practice on these two pillars. I think that the gap and what new elements have actually emerged due to COVID-19. And in terms of, I think this discussion has come that in terms of the ability in public service, I think there is some courses on crisis management, but I think the ability to forecast and ability to analyze before the actual event take place, that is now a big issue. And we have to, I think, improve our forecasting ability and analytical ability ahead. Because for a country like Bangladesh, say, if a crisis or pandemic like this happens, we have to think of many issues. For example, food security for such a huge population. So suddenly you cannot really cope up with this challenge because we're dealing with a huge population. So I think in the public service, this sort of ability is essential. The other two issues that I have to, I should say that I agree mostly to the areas of improvement raised by Professor Basu, but also I would like to add 2 points or elaborate a little bit on 2 points. I think we should acknowledge that many of the panelists, and I think also from Professor Basu, that there is a need for greater cooperation between universities or academia and the actual public sector or public administration. This is true. And say from the Minister of Public Administration, I can say that we are having a very good relationship with institutions, both inside Bangladesh and outside Bangladesh. In fact, we have a memorandum of agreement with many universities outside Bangladesh. But I think, as I understand a bit about the university education in Bangladesh, most of the universities actually don't have the industry link. So anyone who is a student of public administration actually should have a first-hand knowledge in the form of internship or maybe his own research or any other form of involvement about what is actually happening in his or her area of study. So this is something that needs to be established from the very beginning. So if someone studies for 6-7 years public administration without this link and then enters into public service, that is not very beneficial. So if you have a link at the very beginning, like many institutions outside Bangladesh in particular, say where I studied for my master's in Canada, they have a very strong link with the public administration and the government. My school had a very strong link, the School of Public Administration at the Carleton University, very strongly linked with the government in Ottawa. So this is something that we have to establish. And also the other factor that you have to enhance the relationship between the training centers within the region. I think within the region, we have a big scope to learn from each other. And from this point, I would like to go to the second point, that the issue of scholarship and research within the public administration. I'm very happy that this issue actually was raised by Professor Basu and some of us, that there are many successful models of public administration in our country and as well as in South Asia. So we can learn from each other, as well as we can also disseminate this information to the rest of the world. I think whenever we think about public administration or financial management or other similar things, we have a tendency to look at the north. But there are many other models which are very indigenous and very successful. For example, microcredit was mentioned. I would say that within 2 years of participation in the UN Public Service Award, Bangladesh was awarded a UN Public Service Award for its, in 2020, for its successful model of digitalization of land administration. So this is the highest level of acknowledgement at the world level that our public service models are very well functioning. So this is something that we have to, I think, refocus a bit. And maybe I think that as a practitioner, I would say that the point where we are lacking is that often we disseminate these information in the form of reports, but it ends there. So what we need to go a step ahead, like if we can get assistance or include the academia, so we can get these models linked to the theories, and as very well explained by Professor Basu, that it should be a continuous cycle. The what is practiced and then examine it, and it goes back to the school or theory, and then it comes to the practice. And if we can establish this process strongly, then I think that both the sides will be beneficial, the theoreticians and also the I would say practitioners. And nowadays, I think in particular with the kind of investments that we have in human resource in our government, we actually have a lot of emphasis on higher education in the bureaucracy. So the prospect of having this link is very bright. So I think this is something that we can think of. I would like to conclude at this point. Maybe in the remaining part, we can come back with the question and answer session. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Dr. Zaul Haq. Certainly, you'll come back again in the second round of question and answer. Now we have among the panelists, we have the last panelist is Dr. Durga Bahadur Nepali. He is Associate Professor, Kathmandu University School of Management. Dr. Bahadur, are you around?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
sir. The floor is yours,
Okay.
and 10 minutes is allocated to you as standard.
Okay.
You may start
Thank
now,
you.
please.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It's my pleasure and privilege to be here with very vibrant and public intellectuals and speakers. And just listening to the Professor Basu, and actually I have learned a lot and very insightful and very comprehensive coverage on the public policy, administrations, and the management. And as she has mentioned about the structural poverty, inequality, and stagnations, and ineffective service delivery are the key features of the public policy and administrations in South Asia. And she has also rightly mentioned the very effective implementation of the SDG, sustainable goals, should be in place, and for tackling all those different issues and challenges and of the whole South Asian public policy, governance, and management. And these are the very important points, and we need to consider to tackle all these problems. And she also highlighted, and there should be the very robust role of the public policy and institutions that should be in place for tackling all those institutions. And focusing on all these problems, and it's very proudly, I would like to mention the Kathmandu University in Nepal has also initiated the Master of Public Policy and Management program. And this is one of the graduate programs, and we're trying to expand a little bit more at the undergraduate levels, and also the various graduate programs, just like PhD and even beyond that. And why we have initiated this program, and Kathmandu itself, it is a public institution. And so far, we have been educating the people and who are at the Kathmandu, and basically the people from the very elite background. And these are the things that we have been doing, and we have been educating the peoples. And also beyond that, we're trying to reach out, because Kathmandu University itself is a very small universities, and we're educating the people that I have mentioned right now. And we're trying to expand beyond that. How can we reach out our Kathmandu universities at the grassroots levels. And mostly kind of the Kathmandu University School of Management itself is managing the private sectors and banking sectors. And it's also our responsibility to go beyond that. And the role of public institutions, it is very, very important that we have already realized, and many speakers have rightly mentioned. And also in our SDG, the critical role of the public institutions, that is a very instrumental for ensuring the effective service delivery of the whole nations, Nepal, India, Bangladesh, and South Asia. And first, focusing on all those different aspects and public accountability of the Kathmandu University, though it is a very small, it is a very kind of, though by virtue of its kind of the constitutions or its kind of the legal status, it seems public institution, but it is more privately managed. But we are trying to respond to it is from the very inception, it is managed very privately, but we're trying to expand our public responsibility and public accountability to support the public institution. That's why we have actually initiated the Master of Public Policy and Management program just to initiate and how can we ensure our public responsibility and accountability, and so that this Master of Public Policy and Management program itself, it is a kind of the degree and as well as the public and a kind of the professional programs. And we have a two motto. It is a university for state transformations, focusing on the university kind of the social responsibility instead of only having the CSR. And also we're trying to persuade and educate or capacitate kind of the employee of the public sectors, so that management skills they will be very much well equipped in enhancing the capacity building or public policy analysis management skill to ensure the effective kind of the service delivery of the public institutions. And actually, thus, as I have already mentioned, the Kathmandu University, and actually we're trying to go beyond that. And how can we ensure the effective service delivery of the public institutions? And from the very beginning, being the kind of the professional programs, and actually we're trying to equip our students with the multidisciplinary, interdisciplinary, and transdisciplinary approaches. And actually that will be very helpful to engage at the community levels. That will be very helpful to equip the various kind of analytical understanding and beyond the classroom teaching and learning. As Professor Basu has also rightly mentioned, and also we should have a perspective of the practitioners and actually to serve the peoples, to have the very kind of very robust role of the public institutions. And actually we should have, and actually the role of actually that very transdisciplinary lens, and actually that is very much well grounded with the practitioner perspective. And actually that will be very helpful for kind of the state and societal transformation. And just I would like to illustrate the one of the point, and IIT Delhi and school of actually IIT Delhi is a very kind of pioneer in introducing a kind of technology and various advanced technology and that sort of things. IIT Delhi has already introduced, and actually it is a very pioneer in introducing that sort of things. But recently, the IIT Delhi in 2020, and actually that has also established the School of the Public Policy, and they are trying to focus beyond their science, technology, innovation, developments, and especially focusing on furthering the interest of the public policy, public interest, and without having the public engagement of the IIT Delhi, and actually they can contribute for capacity building of the politicians and capacity building of the policy leaders, and who are working in the field of the science, technology, and innovation and the development. And actually IIT Delhi has also initiated that sort of things in 2020, and we are also trying to contribute like the IIT Delhi, and I think just taking some of the essence that IIT Delhi has rightly mentioned or rightly initiated the very vibrant and important programs for having the top quality policy professionals and the people and who are working in the public sectors and who are working in the academia and who are working in the political sectors. They should have a critical understanding and critical and analytical ability and ethical practices for furthering the interest of the public interest. And actually, these are some of the essences that IIT Delhi has also rightly mentioned. And actually focusing on that sort of things, also Kathmandu University School of Management has also rightly initiated this program, and just for furthering the interest of the public policy or capacity building of the public institutions. And actually, the academia should have that sort of the passions to be engaged with the public institutions. Even in one of the conversations, Kathmandu University Vice Chancellor has rightly mentioned, and we are very happy to contribute by establishing some of the very outer center in the Singadarwa. That is a very important point, and where the public sector employees are very well engaged in a very rigorous process or in a planning process and designing. And actually, we're trying to demonstrate our public responsibility and engagements in a field of the public sectors, and actually focusing on the key features of our program, Kathmandu University School of Management Public Policy. And we are very much focusing on the research practices and critical pedagogy. And it is not new for all of us, but actually we have initiated this program just to contribute, as many speakers, including the Professor Basu, has rightly mentioned, on the ineffective service delivery of the public institution, the structural inequality and poverty. And actually we are trying to be engaged and focusing on the state, university, state transformation and social transformation. And we should be actually well engaged at the community levels and beyond the classroom, and actually we're trying to be engaged. And very proudly, I would like to mention that in line with the vision of the Kathmandu universities to capacitate the capacity and management skill of the public sector employee. And actually we have done some contractual agreements or kind of memorandum of understandings to educate, and actually Ministry of Federal Affairs, and that is responsible for managing the public affairs of the public sector employee, and they are quite happy to move ahead. And this is the very small things for all of us, but in long run, and it will contribute a lot for strengthening the capacity building of the public institutions. And these are the things that we have been doing. And also, I feel very happy to share, and we are just dedicated to establish the public policy and public policy lab, and that is very dedicated to have a very robust policy analysis, to have a very robust policy governance and reform. And actually, whatever the things that we have initiated at academia, and Ministry of Federal Affairs had rightly recognized and institutionalized that the whole things are kind of the policy lab at the Ministry of Federal Affairs. And Ministry of Federal Affairs and trying to upscale that beyond the sectoral ministry by establishing that policy lab at the National Planning Commission. And these are the things that we're trying to contribute to the public institutions. And taking some of the essence of the MIT Nepal lab and Harvard evidence-based policy design. And actually, they are happily contributing whole global communities. For instance, the evidence-based policy design in MIT lab, and they are very instrumental kind of reducing the corruption of the Manrega. That is a very biggest kind of public portal of the India. And that Harvard University's MIT Nepal lab has been contributing rigorously from its inception. As a result, whole the grassroots communities of the India, and actually they are being benefited, and taking that sort of essence, and Kathmandu University is also trying to establish our policy labs to support the whole policy governance process and policy making process of the government of Nepal. And also we're trying to contribute in a very effective ways. And these are the things that we are trying to move ahead. And these are the things, even not only, and according to the new constitution of the Nepal, and we have a 3 different tier of the governments, just like as the India has. In Nepal also had the federal kind of province and the local government, and also we're collaborating with the Kathmandu metropolitan city. Kathmandu metropolitan city is, this is a local government located in Kathmandu. It is a very oldest kind of the pioneer local governments, and also we're trying to establish the policy outreach center to solve the whole policy making process that Kathmandu metropolitan city is pursuing. And actually we're trying to mention Kathmandu universities and KMC collaboration like that. And actually in line with the presentation of the Professor Basu, and also we're trying to actually appreciate the contribution of the local governments and how can we pursue further. And actually that is a very important lab for all of us, for the faculty and also for the students. That is a very important. And our students, we are trying to engage and equip our students from the very beginning. And they should have a very public accountability, and they should have that sort of the passion to contribute. The practitioners, local government, provincial government, even the federal government, and these are the things that we are trying to actually contribute on that. And at the end, what I'm trying to say about the policy lab, and actually it is based on the human-centered design thinking approaches towards the policy innovations and that sort of thing. And actually, the academia are very much smart in having the very well-established knowledge and taking some of the essences from the global communities. And without having our
Dr. Punna, you have just crossed the time.
Our contributions that
Can
should
you
be
wind
very
up
much
in a
locally
minute,
rooted,
please?
and not only the globally connected. And actually, we should be very much locally rooted. Locally rooted means, and we should be accountable towards capacity building of the public institutions, and we should appreciate the knowledge and understanding of the practitioners' knowledge. And actually, we are happy. We feel very much happy to use the word transdisciplinary lens. And actually, in this way, thus we are very much dedicated to contribute for the state transformations and for the societal transformations, or university and community partnership principle, or that sort of the engagements, and being in academia, and we are trying to contribute for capacity building of the whole.
Thank you, Dr. Purna Nepali.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for giving us very illustrated introduction to the Kathmandu University. We look forward to learn from you about, in particular, the policy lab, which we have already started here at NSU. So I will take the privilege of inviting 2 of the distinguished scholars I see in here, Dr. Wahiduzaman and Dr. Kamrul Alam. I will ask you and beg you and request you to give a brief overview, maybe 2 to 3 minutes each, or maybe maximum 5. So shall I request Dr. Wahiduzaman? 5 minutes is the limit for us. Thank you. The floor is yours, and followed by Dr. Kamrul Alam. Unmute, please. Unmute, please. You have to unmute. Unmute.
No. Thank you so much. I saw there would be a special panel on leadership, and Dr. Khair was there, Noor Alam Siddiqui is there, and it was, I thought that, but it is 3:25 a.m. in the morning. So
sorry to hear that.
So thank you so much, Dr. Basu, Dr. Farad, Dr. Noor Alam Siddiqui, Dr. Ziaul Haq, Joint Secretary MOPA, Dr. Purna Bahadur, and Rajan Khanal from Nepal. I thank you very much. I fully agree with Dr. Basu that efficiency and effectiveness can be improved, should be improved through education and training. Let's talk about training. Yes, training program. Nowadays, they call it learning, training, and development. Books have changed. I teach a course called training and development. I call it now learning, training, and development through training. But in that instance, training must be relevant, training must be systematic, training must be useful. And also public administration. Dr. Salahuddin is sitting here, professor of public administration. Noor Siddiqui, former professor, former faculty member. Kamrul Alam is there. They can verify if I'm wrong. Dr. Asaduzzaman was very dear to me. He was 2 years senior to me, but he was like a brother. We had the opportunity. Dr. Ghiashuddin is no more there. But let us see what kind of curriculum they have. Introduction to public administration, introduction to personal administration, introduction to organizational theory and behavior. We call them also budgeting, and I'm talking about my curriculum in here. But there is depth of relevant curriculum now. And somebody was talking about forensics, and I agree. Emergency management courses, crisis management courses, disaster management courses. There should be some courses. I introduced myself, ethics in public administration. Public policy was not there in our curriculum 25 years back, 28 years back. I have looked at the syllabi of Jahangirnagar Public Administration Program, Chittagong University Public Administration Program, definitely Dhaka University. I've seen that those things can be recast. Respectfully, I'm saying something could be called. We say, oh, we have to see what are the NASPAA requirements, what kind of competencies are needed nowadays, not in only South Asia. So I agree. So training program should be relevant, useful, recast. With the syllabi of 1963-64 of ACAD, mid-level civil servants in Bangladesh. These are copied in NASPAA using the word Bangladesh. I've collected the syllabi through Dr. Shahiduddin, syllabi of 1964, 63, 68, 69, and then NASPAA copied them. The word Pakistan was substituted by what? Bangladesh. Everything was there. So Dr. Maqsood Ali asked me, what is the difference between 27 and 28 course? I said, there is a difference. There are a lot of differences. Courses are same, materials are there. Only the names of the trainees are different. So we have to see whether or not the training programs are relevant, especially the mid-level, whether or not PATC can deal with the training programs of education cadres and all that. I think this is my recommendation, if I can go in December, that there should be an administrative staff college separately designed for both mid-level as well as senior level civil servants. PATC should deal with basically the foundation course and other courses as they see fit. So the time has come to redesign the course syllabi, course contents of the, okay. About new public management, these are paper pictures, paper boulders. I was professor and chairman of public management, then I included criminal justice department. We are now Department of Political Science and Public Management. I'm no longer the chairman. I was chair for 17 years. I had the opportunity to change the syllabi and all that, old wine in new bottle. Public administration, it sounds that traditional, this and that, but there is hardly any difference between the word public management. Management is management, but public sector management is 100% different from private sector. There is no relevance so far. Private sector, they make profit. Private sector is corrupt, but still that in public sector management and public administration curriculum can be tuned together, but taking input from both the civil service and all that. About the relationship, I'll take like 1 more minute maybe. I have talked to faculty members of Jahangirnagar University. I've talked to faculty members of Rashtra University. I've talked to faculty members of Dhaka University. There are good programs nowadays. But the relationship between PATC, for that matter, with the other training institutions are almost zero. There are some faculty members. Most of the guest speakers are drawn from the civil service institutions. Today we are talking about, it's the North-South Initiative, North-South University. And I attended the seminar last year organized by PATC. That is outstanding. They should do this kind of thing, exposure to both the PATC faculty members, MDS, directors, deputy directors, and all that. This kind of training program should be regularly focused. And I have to be very cruel about this. Most of the civil servants now, not most, a lot of civil servants are PhDs from other universities. And government should rethink about, let them do a 12-month program in North-South or Dhaka University or outside, not in the so that should be a recommendation to think about, to make them solid. They can deal with pandemic. We are 1,000 miles away from that pandemic situation. Pandemic has destroyed everything. But I'm talking about the normal time. Public sector management has a lot to do. Everything depends on who gets what, when. This is not decided by politicians. Who gets what, when, and how, done by the civil servants. Can I take another 30 seconds? I'm in touch with Kaligans, Gazipur district. There was a civil servant there. His name is Shibli Sadak. He has been just transferred. Outstanding civil servant. He has created a library, and Isa Khan was buried in Kaligans, Bakhtarpur. He has created a mausoleum. We asked for some donations, and I gave him 50,000 taka. He has put a fixed deposit there. He created a public library in a place, Kaligans, Radha Rajendra Ryan High School, and all that. Civil servants he has destroyed the land crochets and everybody. He took care of everything. So there are a lot of civil servants who have done a lot of work, and we have no other choice but to depend on efficient, effective, equitable, fair, justice and fairness as a custodian. Bureaucracy is corrupt. We know that. But yet we have to see that they are given proper training and also education. Education is smart border. And thank you so much, Dr. Basu. That was the lead paper. And I agree with everything you say, but there should be meaningful cooperation. Civil service has got a habit that, we know everything. Our program is very relevant. PATC should change, recast, revise the syllabi of mid-level civil service training and senior level civil service training program, because all reports, all commission reports have said that. This is not my exaggerations. I'm not overstating. This is a fact. Okay, thank you so much for organizing this kind of conference. Thank you so much. Khair, thank you so much. Dr. Khair.
Thank you. Thank you very much. May I take the privilege of inviting Dr. Kamrul Alam to have an overcapping views on it, including the keynote speaker.
Thank you, Professor Salahuddin Aminuজ্জামান.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you.
Thank you very much. I think I'll be very brief because the topic was mainly training and capacity building for public sector leaders who can lead the nation beyond COVID-19. Dr. Basu, thank you very much for a splendid presentation. You have crafted a beautiful tapestry with all issues into one broad picture. I will pick few colors from your tapestry. You mentioned that the state plays a very important role, and I think panelists have, very categorically mentioned that state did play a very important role during the COVID-19. So my point is state matters. So public administration researchers and teachers should take this point seriously, that state matters. If state matters, then politics and administration relationship should be revamped, should be reconfigured. because this relationship is important, because without a supporting relationship, South Asian nations will not be able to create transformational and entrepreneurial leaders who can lead the nation in this century. But I think the problem in South Asian public administration system is that public administration is not the study of public bureaucracy. Public administration is the study of society, economy, politics, and so on and so forth. So, but my observation is that the public servants, public sector academics and researchers do come from the educated middle class of South Asia. Now, this educated middle class find it difficult to develop something very contextually mentioned, that culture-specific policies and strategies should be developed. But what we see that this Western educated middle class like us, we try to adopt the Western model. We try to, change a little bit, but the genuinity is not there. Because there is an ethical deficit in the minds of the middle class and the public servants and the academia in South Asia. There is an ethical fear because they do not come up with objective observations of what to be done to lead the society. We can talk about democracy, we can talk about egalitarianism, we can talk about social justice, poverty alleviation. You have covered most of the points in your paper, Dr. Basu. But I have a problem to accept that whether we are able to deliver that. The reason is the educated middle class that lead the nation of South Asia are not democratic in mind. In their social DNA, they are not egalitarian. They are not democratic. Forgive me if I am very blunt. I am one of them, right? We have commodified this debate to our own advantage. Like poverty has been commodified by microfinance institutions in South Asia. So I think we need to revisit. Dr. Ziaul Haq made a very interesting and very solid point that academia should reach the administrators and the society. There is no genuine research in universities in South Asia. Maybe we have some in India, but not in Bangladesh, that we are still suffering from what we call the ethical fear. Whether the government will be dissatisfied or the large multinational organizations supporting our consultancy work, whether they will be are disappointed. So all these things are affecting our intellectual consciousness. So it is important that we should come out of that to take a different role. My third point is, Professor Salahuddin, please stop me if I cross my time.
You have 2 minutes to go.
There is another point. I think that would be my last.
No problem.
To create a democratic polity, to create or support a robust governance system, fair, competitive environment, we need a genuine social transformation. And that social transformation should have the critical mass that can support the development of the transformation of a society. Without that social transformation at the local level, we won't get a democratic society. What we get elected authoritarianism. That is what South Asian nations have been experiencing. Of course, election is not a democracy. It is one of the means. So I think this is my observation. Maybe I'm just a devil advocate here, but I think the panelists have identified some important, practical functional issues that we should address in revamping courses and defining new course and developing a relationship between politics and administration. Because I think elected governments, state needs to create conditions so that we have leaders who are transformational and entrepreneurial. I have been involved in public sector training programs for many years. I can tell you that public administrators in Bangladesh are competent, are qualified, are capable. But I think we do not have a system in Bangladesh or in South Asia that can support that support the creation of a transformational and entrepreneurial leadership that South Asian countries require. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We have 3 minutes to wind up. Well, I believe it or not, I took note like an undergrad student, very, very religiously. So there are so many points I've learned from the panelists, which I'm very proud, but definitely I'll write it down and give it to the organizers. And that will be something very important for them to make an abstract. So I really, before I thank Dr. Basu, I really thank the panelists for their very, very focused and very meaningful in-depth comments, but in a precise form. So I beg apology for stopping you at this time. But Dr. Basu, if you allow me, I have read it very clearly, and it is full of highlights, etc. I have 6 points that I have got. My good friend Priya always says.
Sir, can you allow us to intervene from the floor, because we have some points to make before you conclude. If you allow us.
May I know who is asked this question?
I am Mizan speaking. Yeah.
Mizan from PTC?
Yes, I worked previously, but now.
Okay, okay. I'll give you a couple of minutes.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir, because I have been, in fact, waiting for this opportunity.
Sure, please.
So much, thank you so much.
Very well.
Okay, thank you so much.
Mizan, go ahead, please.
Okay, sir. Thank you. I should start with the disclaimer first, because here I see the scholars of South Asian experts of public administration, and I did not study public administration per se, but I have been practicing public administration for quarter century.
I know that very well, Dr. Mizan.
Okay. So no, sir, because but many of this. So because if I make any mistake, I hope they will excuse me. So what I have been experiencing from my study and practice of public administration, I see several missing points. Some of have been rightly identified by Professor Kamrul Alam, sir, that public administration, perhaps we are trying to understand it in isolation. Public administration necessarily a political thing. It deals with market, it deals with governance and development are both political in nature. So sometimes we are missing in our discussion this particular thing. So this is why it is impacting, why public administration, particularly in South Asia, is not working. So you have got some points from Professor Kamrul Alam's deliberations, and also Professor Farhad Hossain mentioned about market failure. And also Noor Siddiqui sir, he has also mentioned state capacity. So I can just briefly flag few points for the considerations of the academics. Say, the entry point for our discussion should be perhaps the Southeast Asian public administration, because they have adopted an indigenous approach to their, to develop the public administration in Southeast Asia, and particularly if we don't have any embedded autonomy, as Peter Evans argued, or also by Sharmal Johnson, he has argued about the economic bureaucracy. So if we don't have any political settlement, so it is very hard to make public administration work for the well-being of the people and for the and also excel in their performance. So my first point would be that we have to, engage ourselves, the academics particularly, based on the political settlement theory. In South Asia, grossly, we see that the political settlement about the civil service is completely missing. So this is my first point, and I don't see much literature on it. The second point is that, about the market failure. Say, for example, NPM, back in 30 years ago, we can remember that we have accepted it like a panacea. We didn't, in fact, then consider that to what extent is going to undermine the state capacity. Even we didn't see much critical discussion on it. So this is very important, that how we are interacting with the market. And when particularly in many of the countries of South Asia, you will see there is a gross overlap between the market actors and the political elites. So when there is a strong overlap between the market actors and the political elites, it's very hard to find any space for embedded autonomy for the civil servants. So this particular point has not been also captured by the recent research done by many of the experts. So I can quote one particular point raised recently by Professor Shamsul Haq, who is from the National University of Singapore. He has argued in a paper recently published that the state approach to civil service is very important. Why Singapore says that we need a first-class civil service? You will see, if you visit the website of the Public Service Division of the Singapore, you will find that the first-class civil service, that's the only thing. It means that is the political settlement. And also, I can go back to the statement made by Vallabhbhai Patel in 1949 in the Indian Parliament, that the Indian administrative service would be the unifying ring for the India, which has many, many states. So this is why still, despite many challenges, IAS has been still producing some results and is still better compared with many civil service systems in the region. So I want to conclude by pointing out the few points that we need to have, arguments for about political settlement. This is seriously missing. This is why many of the political elites don't pay serious attention to the professional civil service. So civil service capacity building is always a secondary issue. First issue should be that to what extent we are considering civil service as an important element for development and governance. So I hope the scholars of this region particularly will focus on this. Thank you so much, sir, for giving this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Mizan. Thank
Sir,
you,
please
Amy.
give me one chance to ask a question.
Okay, Amina saying who is there? Nandita.
I'm Nandita. Yeah.
Just a minute, please.
Yeah, of course.
Because I don't want to earn the bad name of crossing the time.
Not
Please,
even a minute.
very brief.
My question is, I have already put up my comments. It's for everyone. My single question is, in this 21st century, why are we calling it a civil service? Why are we not calling it a public service? Why are we not focusing on that front?
Okay, that's very, very pertinent question for the researchers, scholars, and the practitioners. Nandita, I appreciate that very much. I think I'll just give a couple of minutes to Professor Rumki Basu. Just a couple of minutes. Although I did quite a good number of homework with the paper, I assure you, I will send what I call 7 points. My friend Dropriyo, he has taught me that don't get too many points, come with 3 if necessary, and then if necessary go to 6. But unfortunately I exceeded to 7. I'm not going to explain it now, but I promise you I'll mail it to you. What is my reaction to your papers? So my colleagues and friends has given an excellent overview of the whole thing, and I can't appreciate more. And of course, you deserve all this attention because your paper triggered our minds. And do you have a couple of minutes to wind up, Dr. Basu?
Thank you. Thank you so much. What I presented today, let me very frankly confess that what I presented in the audience today was practically 50% of the paper that I wish to present, but I do understand due to lack of time, one could not make the entire presentation. So there were many other things that I wish to say. However, let me be very brief, and I thank all the panelists here today to bring out all the points that I perhaps had wished to make but could not. They did bring it out on the table, and that the rounded discussion that happened after my presentation, I really must thank the panelists for that, because they did bring out very, very pertinent points in our discourse. Generally, the discourse today was meant to be on public administration, the future of the subject, and of course, how training public leadership matters in South Asia, and whether the training programs for civil servants need a revamp or not, and how much should we update a theory with practice, or take in the practices that are happening on the ground autonomously, whether they should be incorporated as part of theory. These were the issues I wished to deal with in detail, but I could not. However, the major point that I would try to, I'm just summing up, the major point that I wish to bring out today was that there is a need for looking at public administration as a discipline from a distinctly South perspective, which brings in South Asia as well. Because, if you look at the discipline of public administration, it has been heavily Western oriented. The inputs have come mostly from the North, from the West, and from advanced developed countries, mainly the USA. So my point is that in the 21st century, to make the discipline more relevant, we need to include the practices, the experiences of administration of the developing world, which constitute almost 80% of the globe. So therefore, if you are not bringing in the Southern perspective, the South-centric perspectives, which is where the challenges of public administration truly lie, because the Western countries or the developed countries they do have some kind of equilibrium. They are equilibrium societies, to my mind, where institutions have stabilized. All the turmoil, all the ferment is going on in the developing world, where institutionalization, which is required for democratization, and if democratization is to be the leitmotif of the 21st century, then you need to look at what is going on in the developing world, who are marching towards democratization. And therefore, their practices are extremely important to be documented. And they have a lot to learn from each other. I don't think they have much to learn from the North or the advanced countries at this point of time. Therefore, I was stressing on South-centric research and codifying the practices of the South, not only South Asia, but other regions, the developing world, where you will find that there's a whole world to uncover, to discover by way of practices. And if that can be codified into theory, then public administration theory, as we understand it today, heavily North-centric, is bound to change. And that would be the third world's, the developing world's contribution to public administration. Bringing in that theory, which comes from practice. And practices have changed, have evolved, have grown. And that is the heartening sign. I just emphasized on COVID-19, because COVID-19 has shown to the rest of the world that South Asian practices of management were definitely something that could be emulated by the West, by the advanced countries. So if we have done well in any sphere, whether it's environmental governance or financial inclusion or women's empowerment or COVID-19 management, or could be any other governance practice, which are, I believe, the problems are similar in the entire South Asian region. If we codify that knowledge, the local practices, the commonalities in the way we handle these problems, we come out with a vast corpus of literature from the South, which would completely change public administrative theory as we understand it. And that was the emphasis that I was making, that when we are talking of new public management, I believe it didn't work, not in the South. So we have to go beyond that. And I have taken Nandita's suggestion that why don't we talk of a new public service? Well, the Denhartian paradigm, there have been, we have gone much beyond new public management in administrative theory. Look at Robert and Janet Denhart's new public service paradigm, or Mark Moore's public value paradigm. So, and of course, the concept of anticipatory governance, somebody was talking of crisis management. Digital governance and anticipatory governance is exactly what's needed for the future, for crisis management. So if you want to bring in new public administrative theory, then you have to look at the actual practices on the ground in the South, and that perspective can go in public administration in the 21st century, a South-centric perspective. That's our contribution to the
Thank you.
subject, to the discipline.
Thank you very much. I